Hello and welcome to this town of blood, thunder, battles, sieges, kings and queens, and of course Tutbury Castle and its ghosts. My name's Richard Felix.
And my name's Leslie Smith, and I'm curator of Tutbury Castle, and I hope today and during the evening as the mist draws in you come with us and find some of those kings and queens of England, because we're definitely going to find some ghosts.
So Leslie, I mean, here we are outside, well, certainly the oldest property in Tutbury itself, the old Dog and Partridge. But I mean, this place goes back thousands of years, doesn't it?
This year, in fact, we found out it goes back even further than we hoped. Even as a curator, historians love of the ancient history. We have discovered that the castle was in fact a site for Stone Age people, which is a big shock to us. We have found flints up there 8,500 years before Christ. No wonder so many lives that have been here within this place will have had such an effect and maybe leave a residue of times past. Although this is now an ancient building, as you see, originally this whole area was a fantastically important medieval town, and earlier still because it was a Saxon fortress as well.
Yeah, of course the name Tutbury is actually fortified place belonging to a Saxon person called Totter.
That's right, absolutely right.
But
and then later, of course, it became Tutbury, a fortified site. That's
yeah,
right.
but in fact there was, I'm right in saying, there was no town here until William the Conqueror actually gave this place to Hugh d'Avranches.
That's right.
Who of course built the very first castle here, the proper castle.
Yes, well the point is there was a Saxon fortress, so it depends what you mean by castle.
Yeah.
And what William, of course, was very good at was taking over what was already a site, because not only was it recognised as a source of power in the area, but also because a lot of the work was already in place. So although the fortified site was there, the people were not here.
Yeah.
They were in the next village called Hatton, which is physically very close by. And what happened was William the Conqueror said, look, if you're prepared to move to the foot of this new castle, this spectacular new hope for the future that there's going to be here, then there will be work for you, and I will also grant you the right to market. Having the right to market was a hugely important economic issue, because in truth it meant that the whole area would be massively sustained economically.
Yeah. Because
only Lichfield, Stafford and Tutbury were granted this.
Gotcha.
You also have to consider that if the Conqueror in 1066 gave orders to build this castle, you listen to that date, the Conqueror arrived in October, his coronation, wasn't it, Richard, was on
December.
Christmas Day.
Yep.
And in that 2 month he gave order to build this castle. It must be a hell of an important spot, and it must be politically terribly important for him to have taken such trouble in such a short window of time.
Yeah.
He was busy that year,
of course.
66 for sure.
So in fact there has been life, death and emotion on this site for thousands of years.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, 10,500 years it looks like we've certainly got for there. And here within the village there would have been a settlement here in a small way, but in a large way it was definitely the Conqueror who made it happen here. And so there would have been all sorts of houses all the way round the castle itself, and spreading out according to trade. Because of course when you've got right to market, people will settle here.
Of course they will, exactly.
We know that Tutbury at one point had 42 different trades. Now that's incredible. All of you can work out about 18 different things, going from making arrows to stargazing to apothecaries and barber surgeons, this sort of thing. But you'll find 42 trades, a difficult number to reach, an incredibly important place.
Of course, yeah. So there are lots of ghosts here, we know that, in Tutbury itself. But the castle, well, I mean, we are talking quite genuinely of Tutbury Castle being one of the most haunted castles in England.
Oh, without doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, it rivaled Windsor in 1361. And if you consider the volume of and the amount, not just of physical people, but of what they're fighting for.
Exactly.
And they're fighting for royalty, they're fighting for trade in the area, and there were literally life and death in a very large and concentrated way up there. So there's bound to be trouble.
Exactly. I think the best thing we can do is go up the hill and have a look.
If you dare.
So here we are, Leslie, approaching Tutbury Castle, this magnificent gateway, reputed to be John of Gaunt's gateway.
Well, it's named John of Gaunt's Gateway because we know he did a lot of building work here in 1361 and 1362. He made tremendous changes here. He was a fantastically wealthy man, of course, father of Henry IV.
Yeah.
So although it's called that, we know the root of it is older.
Yeah.
There is evidence here of building work that's considerably older, yes. But this gateway is so many lives through here.
That's the thing. I mean, it's so poignant, isn't it, that we're walking through here as so many people, some tormented, such as Mary Queen of Scots, of course, who actually would have ridden through this gateway.
And absolutely petrified, that girl.
Oh.
She'd got 2 dead husbands, a 3rd going mad in a Danish jail, you know, a son left behind. She'd really lost so much. And when she came here, she knew she was finished and washed up. Mid-20s, it said she vomited blood. She was so terrified she got from a horse and vomited blood. And that, of course, is something that the human aspect suddenly hits you.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we hear these names and we talk about them, don't we, in life or in history books, and then suddenly you've got this girl trying to keep her dignity, desperately coming to this place where she's looked at, the place of her enemies in the heart of England. She must have been absolutely terrified.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's terrifying now.
No, it is. And imagine huge wooden gates here, barred, the clamour of battle, the number of soldiers trying to get through these gates, the number of soldiers on this side trying to stop them coming through the gates, and the number of sieges that actually took place here. No wonder, of course, there are ghost stories to do with this gateway. And of course there is one, isn't there, an incredible story here.
Incredible story, yes, the keeper, that's right. What do you know about it?
Well,
What
I
have
mean,
you heard?
my stories are that people coming to a craft fair here one day, a young chap and his girlfriend apparently came here and were accosted by a man in costume, in uniform,
That's the one.
a knight in armour sort
Actually,
of.
he wasn't in uniform, he was in full armour.
Really?
And, he was a massive man apparently, and this chap came and complained. Is that the?
Yes, absolutely.
And said some idiot of an actor has just jumped out in full armour and told me to get over the fence. What's he talking about?
That's it.
And the thing that makes it so pressing and exciting, that comment, is because we know historically this figure has been seen, but what he says in fact is, get thee hence.
Old English.
And of course he didn't realise what he was hearing. And of course he said, why has this bloke asked me to get over the fence? And I found that, I have to say, Richard, one of the most pressing bits of evidence, because he had no idea what he was hearing. This huge man. Imagine the power of the keeper of this gateway. It was a terribly important job, because he decided who came in or out and had tremendous power in controlling this gateway. It wasn't the only entrance to the castle, but this certainly became absolutely the main entrance of the castle. This figure has been seen regularly, and there's a very, very strong atmosphere here.
Yes, indeed.
And we also have a very unpleasant and frightening photograph of a woman whose eyes are clearly lights,
yes,
looking down, and a babe in her arms that you can see clearly right up. And the reason that was impressive is I was there when the photograph was taken. It absolutely wasn't faked, and the man had no idea that there once had been apartments,
of course,
up here.
Oh yeah.
And I'll let you see that photograph because it's very unnerving.
Good grief. Now, of course, here on the gateway as well, was it Sir Ralph Sadler who had apartments here? Or
in fact, Sadler was one of Mary's first keepers. He might have done, but the one we most particularly remember is Amias Paulet.
Of course,
he
yes.
was the last keeper of Mary, and he was a Puritan and obsessively disliked her. He saw her sort of at the whore of Babylon, and he was terrified, really, in many ways, that she would get out and spread Catholicism with her. So we know that he actually decided to lodge himself over this gate.
So that he could actually keep an eye on the town.
He was so fierce about her.
And an eye on the main way into the
Make
castle.
sure there was no hope she could get out.
Yeah.
You see. And we've got to remember this is the citadel on top of the hill. We see it as a ruin now because of Cromwell, but in fact it had huge walls and it was packed with streets, packed with cobbled streets, black and white houses, nearly 1,000 souls here at its height.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic place of huge energy, perched high on this wonderful glacial.
And of course the thing is, how many souls are still here now?
Well, when I first came here, I thought, I wonder if this is nonsense.
Oh yeah.
But I don't now.
No.
You cannot possibly be here as I have been and seen what I have seen. And as much as I'd like to say I have a fantastically logical mind as a historian, it cannot possibly... Look, there's something here.
Yeah.
There's no question.
Let's go and find him, shall we? They say walls have ears, but I mean here we are on the top of the battlements, huge stone walls here. I'm a great believer, as you probably know already, in the stone tape theory, where traumatic and tragic events, such as death, can be recorded into the fabric of the building. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but I mean, well, just imagine the number of people, the kings, the queens, the dukes, the lords, and the ordinary soldiers that stood here against these battlements, watching the huge armies arrayed here, waiting to lay siege to this place.
Must have been terrifying.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just like a history book, this place. As if you fall open the pages and out come tumbling these fantastic names. But also, I think of the laundresses and the stargazers and the dong fathers and all the other jobs that are done here. And there were a lot of folks here in this ruin on a hill, but of course in its time, it was absolutely complete and beautiful.
Oh yeah, and here it is looking out over Staffordshire, Derbyshire.
Yeah, on the border.
Yeah, and I actually call this Derby's Castle because it's so close. But the real reason, of course, is that for 127 years, Tutbury Castle was the headquarters of the Earls of Derby,
that's right.
the de Ferrers family. And this castle was actually given to Henry de Ferrier from Ferrier and Chambray in Normandy, obviously for helping him in 1066. But they became Earls of Derby after the Battle of the Standard, when King Stephen gave them that title, and hung on to it for 127 years. But the problem is, they were always rebelling against the king.
Yeah, they always backed the wrong horse. They were inevitably following the prince, and of course, needless to say, the monarch got a bit fed up with this. De Ferrers were fantastically powerful. This was head office for 200 manors for them. 200 manors in their name, the De Ferrers. And that's not just buildings, of course, it's great plots of land as well. So if you consider all of that as a whole, you realise suddenly that the De Ferrers needed to be handled with care. And I suspect that's why it was such a long time before the monarch finally said, right, enough, because they really have become threatening.
And eventually took it off them, gave them to one of the king's youngest sons, Edmund, who became Earl of Lancaster, and then in 1399 it was given to Henry Bolingbroke, who of course became Henry IV, the king, and from that time onwards it became the property of the sovereign.
Yes, and remained there. And remained there to this day. The Duke of Lancaster, Her Majesty the Queen, is the Duke of Lancaster. Despite the fact she's a woman, that title remains as androgynous, you say. And you've got to think to yourself as well, other than that 11-year gap when Cromwell came here and tore the heart out of this castle and this area for his own cause, you also have to realise during that time, when this was happening, that the Crown was determined to be back here, and they did. Charles II himself came here. Although ruined and repaired some of it, the castle remains much loved by the monarch.
Sobering thought, isn't it?
It is a sobering thought, all those lives.
Yeah. I'm standing in front of the 15th century North Tower. This is the highest tower still preserved at Tutbury Castle, and it has a ghost story. A young lady lived here with a husband, and the husband went off to fight, so she took a lover. And of course, the husband came back early and caught the two of them here in the tower. A fight broke out. The lover was killed, and the husband unfortunately died a few days later from blood poisoning after his wounds. The young lady, of course, by that time had got neither lover or husband, and she took herself to the top of this tower and threw herself off, and she died somewhere down here at the foot of the tower. And her ghost is still seen wandering around the area at the bottom of the tower. And a ghost is also seen on the staircase of the tower inside. People visiting this tower sense a strange atmosphere, a sad atmosphere in here, and they say that anyone who lights a candle on this staircase, it never stays lit. It appears to be snuffed out by unseen hands. Now, you know I'm a stickler for the truth, and legend has it that a candle won't stay lit in this tower. So I've been and got some matches and a candle, and we'll see what happens. Proof or not. Got plenty of matches. Oh my God. Oh, I don't like it. I'm going. Tell you what, I said it was the tallest tower at Tutbury. It's a long way up here, but there's a reason. I was doing a ghost walk a few years ago in Tutbury, and I was in one of the pubs. A lady heard me talking, and she said, do you mind if I interrupt? Because I've got a ghost story about the castle and Mary Queen of Scots. And her son was doing a dare here. He spent the night in the North Tower, knowing the ghost story of the White Lady. He was only 13, and middle of the night, he heard moaning, actually down below, long way down below. And remember, he was on his own here. He came to the top here and looked out, and he saw a figure, a white figure of a woman, gliding in between where the tent is now and the chapel. And he said that in all the history books he'd seen, the pictures of Mary Queen of Scots were exactly the same as the ghostly figure that he saw gliding across the grass here at Tutbury in the middle of the night. And then the other thing that the lady said to me was, by the way, my son is not the sort of person to make up stories, and he's now a Lieutenant Colonel in the Royal Marines, and he still tells the story to this day. And she said he's not the sort of person to either be frightened of ghosts or to make up ghost stories. So he's one of the many people that have actually witnessed, seen the ghost of Mary Queen of Scots here at Tutbury Castle, her most hated prison. Welcome to the dungeons of Tutbury Castle. This dark, dank, underground room here is believed to be one of the dungeons of the original castle. The number of people that actually walk into this place, stand for a few seconds, and then turn and run. I must be honest with you, there is obviously a very damp atmosphere, and it is extremely cold down here. There's a figure that's seen frequently lurking in the corner of the room down here. Large figure with a cloak and a hood. They believe it to be one of the torturers, referred to as a necromancer, an evil demon, a harbinger of death that still roams down here. And the figure has also been seen standing outside, standing by this doorway, I presume, waiting for his next victim. It's not a place that is too bad in the daytime. It is quite light outside. In fact, the sun's shining. But I would imagine when nightfall comes that this place will take on a very, very different aspect. And I certainly don't want to be down here. Not in the dark. So I'll beat a hasty retreat now. I'm about to enter St. Peter's Chapel. This was built in the 1170s and is the oldest part of Tutbury Castle. It was originally 2 stories high. It was mainly destroyed, as most of the castle was, after the English Civil War by Cromwell's soldiers. But if you can just imagine the emotion, the collective emotion and fear that would have taken place inside this building. People coming in and praying while they were under siege, praying for safe deliverance from this terrible place. And there is a ghost story connected with this building. Many years ago, when they were doing an archaeological dig here, this was when a gentleman called Barry Vallens was the custodian, and he lived just across there where the Great Hall is. He found a Tudor ring somewhere buried inside the mortar of the church. He took the ring, obviously, back to where he lived and kept it there, presumably to show the archaeologists when they came back. Middle of the night, him and his wife, fast asleep, and they heard a rapping on the window by the front door. Barry, of course, wondered who it was, went down and opened the door. There was no one there. This happened on 3 successive nights, exactly the same. The last night, when it was windy and the rain was beating against the windows, but they still heard this rapping on the window. Opened the door, nobody there. That was too much for Barry. And the following morning he took the ring back, put it back in the mortar and left it. And that ring is still somewhere here, preserved in the mortar of this church. And of course, the rappings, the tappings on the window stopped and have never started again. Now, this place was under siege many, many times, and you must remember that people under siege, of course, well, they can't get out. They get killed in here for whatever reason, but a lot of people die in here. And one of the tactics, of course, of a besieging army is to actually spread plague inside the place by doing dreadful things like firing arrows with pieces of rotting meat into the fort, and there are many people buried here, and they believe that in between these two trees down there is a huge pit, possibly a plague pit, and they reckon that there's up to 300 bodies buried inside Tutbury Castle. And people often see spirit lights that are flitting about around the area of these trees, and they believe those to be the spirits of those poor unfortunate souls that are buried down there. Buried, of course, probably without the last rites being given to them. Buried in unconsecrated ground. Hence the fact that they're not at rest. But up here, on the highest point, is a folly. This is not actually part of the ruins of Tutbury Castle. This was actually built here by Lord Vernon, who owned the property, and he just had it built as a rather attractive ruin. But underneath here is believed to be an oubliette, which is a large dungeon, a place where people were actually imprisoned, thrown in and forgotten about. And one day, hopefully, someone will come along here and do a dig to either prove it or disprove it. But on many, many occasions, people see figures, ghostly, dark shadows, wandering about up here amongst these ruins.
So welcome to the Great Hall. This is the absolute heart of Tutbury Castle. In here Charles I was, and also his nephew Prince Rupert. Also in here Charles II, and there's an ancient wall in here which dates from the 1100s. I sit before you now as Mary, Queen of the Scots. I have the right accent, for by now I have been imprisoned, it is 1585, for nearly 20 years in England. I'm wearing the sort of gown exactly that I would have worn, taken from the record as prisoner here at Tutbury, my most detested prison. There's no doubt about it, for a lot of people who come here looking for Mary, they find her in me. Not just because of the way I look, but I do admit, although I originally thought it was nonsense, that there is something that does happen here when I wear this gown. It's as if I'm almost recognised, and from me comes a different stillness, and when I'm speaking to people, I do know something remarkable can happen. Some say it's mass hysteria. I do remember a team of psychologists who came to see me one night, and one of them said, "A marvellous thing, you're making us think about history, and look what's happened. Therefore we hallucinate." And she's the woman who actually fainted in the King's bedroom. So it doesn't pay to be cynical here at Tutbury Castle, because it is an extraordinary place. We've had 8 scientific teams out in the last 4 years, and without exception they are flummoxed about what on earth happens here. I'm now going to see if I can speak to you as Mary. Sometimes I'm just playing the role, and sometimes something more happens. One thing's for sure, Mary Stuart has something to say still. I believe she uses me like an answer phone occasionally, or I'm certainly not claiming to be a medium or an actress. I'm just an answer phone machine for a dead queen who had great sadness here. And I have a huge empathy for her and the living and the dead who've been here in this castle, and those who will come in the future. You see me as I was in my 43rd year here. I am your mighty and most merciful monarch, if only you'd have listened. But instead you chose Elizabeth, daughter of the goggle-eyed whore Anne Boleyn, to be your queen. When I first rode here, I knew I was finished. I had fallen like a dark star from the heavens to be with you. I can smell the wood smoke now, and people running from their common houses to look upon me. I was 5'11" when the average woman was 4'11". Red hair pouring down my back, so heavy you couldn't lift it with one hand. I was Queen of all of Scotland and Queen of all of France when England was in the filth. And I appear before you now in this form. I let you down, England, and I am sorry. At about this time, a man from Derby, called Babington, reached out a hand to me and said, "I have loved you long. He was my last chance. The crown of heaven or the crown of England." And I took his hand, and so would you. For there had been no knight in shining armour for me,
No France, no Spain, no other Catholic country to challenge the Protestant queen with a coal bed. You had me held habeas corpus here in England. My blood is upon your head and your ancestors. Kyrie eleison, Domine eleison, Kyrie eleison. Christ have mercy, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, as we must all say. I went from here to Chartley on the Stafford Road, and there was arrested into Fotheringhay, where I was tried and found guilty as a traitor. How can I be a traitor? I'm not even English. I'm French and Scottish. But on the 8th of February 1587, I came out of my rooms, said to my girls who were screaming, "Ne crie pour moi, promettez-vous. Don't cry for me one drop, I've promised you." I was saying I'm all right, with great courage there, in a black gown with acorns on me of pearls and little gold cups, the sign of faith. For I was dying for my faith too, be assured of that as well. My executioner was Simon John Bull, there lolling in a white shirt, and his assistant to hold down my legs, and I an anointed queen. I put gold into his hand. "Thank you, I forgive you, you're sending me home." And having taken off the black gown and beneath the red gown of the martyr, I put out my arms and said goodbye to England, Tail Manus. He swung at me, and he missed. Back of my throat 3 times, there, gagging blood. In the end, I did lay still, the great white queen of Europe. And although I left this earth all those years ago, there is some of me that is here still. There is still much of me that reaches out to man, and you certainly reach out to me.
And now, back as Leslie, there's no doubt about it that the reenactment, for some reason, does actually conjure up, for want of a better word, spirits, and we've obviously proved it yet again. But it's not only reenactment and clothing, but actual real items. And of course, this room is actually full, isn't it, of original historic items that I presume hold memories.
Well, they may do, and if you consider what some of them did for a living, no wonder.
Exactly.
I mean, here at the castle, it's very important, as much as we possibly can, we have items that are absolutely the real thing, with the correct provenance, in other words, the correct background. We can prove what it is. Real Elizabethan armour. A lot of people find this extraordinarily powerful, and there's lots of claims of a face being seen in there, and I have had photographs sent to me of a face appearing, and quite often on camera, maybe even today, these things can appear.
Yes.
And of course, one's very wary that nowadays there's a great deal of fakery that's possible with computers and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm satisfied these are perfectly ordinary folks who have had maybe a trick of the light or their own experience of it. That is definitely real.
Yes.
This costume, because it's absolutely not fancy dress, but so very accurate, the impact of me, I know, is strong, this white face and the look of it and the tragedy of it. But also, enormous number of people, I do mean enormous, see these lights coming from me, this whirlwind that will appear near me. These things are seen on me in civvies, I have to tell you, but nothing like the volume. It's as if they come to look at you, it's extraordinary.
Yes.
I mean, look at this piece of furniture. This is real, and when Shakespeare was alive, it was in use, a court cupboard.
Yeah.
So I always relate to people when I'm talking about history, because it is, again, I say to you, it is the people that make history fascinating.
Correct. Yeah.
What did they smell like? What did they eat? How did they live their lives? And it's as if we want to take the pain away for some of them as well,
Yes.
like me.
Yeah.
People still pray for me now. It's a remarkable thing and something I'm very glad for. When I say me, I mean Mary, of course. So here we have the court cupboard, and over here we have something extraordinary. Now look at this chest here, Richard. This is extraordinary because you can touch it. It's wonderful English oak. It was an antique when Henry VIII was born. When Henry VIII was a baby in his mother's arms, this was already an antique. And if you look at how big the planks are that cut down the oak tree that made this piece of furniture, is it 1,000-year-old wood?
God, yes.
And who's leant on it, and what do they giggle about? And was it the same thing as now? Well, of course, we are not so different.
No, we're not.
I'm only removed from you by 25 generations. You all knew 3 with Grandma. She told you of another 3, so there's 6 off the bill in one conversation. So that's close, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
This is a real diplomatic bag from the 1500s, but this is one thing that does seem to have an extraordinary energy of its own. It's extremely rare. It is in fact a real execution sword.
I know.
Now, I know you've seen this before because you and I have worked together over the years. Now, there's been a tremendous amount of activity about this, and I'm satisfied that people who have these experiences don't know what it is. Now, because of what we're doing today with the filming and the folks who want to draw close and see this, they will know now, but I've had far too many people pick it up, say they can smell blood. Maybe it was mass hysteria, but the fact that it is a real execution sword, it really has been used. You'll see I'm holding it because we like our visitors, so we keep it blunt these days. But in its day, it could cleave hair on water, they say.
Gosh.
So it's a dispatcher, an extraordinary piece. And this very small handle proving again its accuracy because people were tiny. Yeah. This man would have had thick fingers, of course, as you well know. And so it is a fantastically exciting piece. But whatever else we say, this corner of the room, as you know, we've had creaking and banging, we've had tapping on the windows here. Yes. I have frequently had the lights go down in the room while I've been speaking. It's absolutely not a stunt. On one occasion when I was very angry as Mary, and I feel she definitely was around, as I was speaking, the lights actually went out completely. Right. And it was a bit panicky for people. I don't know, but I mean, I used to juggle with the logic of this, but I have to say to you, I do really think there is something now.
Oh, yes.
I mean, this is not wishful thinking. There is definitely something here. And so if this idea, if stones could talk, something holds the residue of man, something that's been living, like a tree, or this sort of thing, I do wonder about it. These pieces are placid and easy, but there are times when the whole castle seems to change. Yes. Certain times of year, I wonder if it's linked with battles or particular events.
Yes, anniversaries, atmosphere.
Yeah, but it becomes malevolent, it becomes depressing, the staff are argumentative, people who are normally very logical will say it's nonsense. Look, I've had some very senior scientists here who say, well, they can't come to terms with it being the dead, but admit that there's definitely something odd. Yeah. Now, the room we're going to go into, the King's bedroom, can I remind you, when we first took this castle over, and I had this room dressed out in a four-poster bed for Charles I to withdraw in, knowing he'd been in this room. This was quite usual. And I had literally dozens of people seeing the same things. There was no mention of ghosts. People were fainting, having dizzy turns. And I thought, well, this is very obviously gas or something. So I had the gas board out. And the bloke left with a dangling hand and said, you've never had gas, Doug, you'll have a job. So there never has been gas here. I was desperately, there is movement on the throne at the moment, as we're speaking. If you just keep that camera on there, there is movement. There is movement. It's not the candles. There is movement of the fabric. Can you see that movement there? I think the viewers, when you play this back, people who are viewing this will see there's definitely some movement there, particularly on the far side. So
this is on the curtain?
Yeah, and it's very common when I'm speaking. In fact, I leave it sometimes because the movement's so great. Well, let it be still. It's as if they are saying to us, pray for us, or you are here, or let me tell you a story. But the King's bedroom is not very exciting when you go in it, not very big, but there is something about it that is amazing. I know you and I have known each other for some years in your work. You had been investigating ghosts way before me, but we'll go in now, I think. Come and have a look and let's see if we can have something in it. We don't know, you see, we never set anything up.
Nobody knows what's going to happen in here.
May I also say, for those of you who doubt, I never allow anything to be faked here. This castle is a place of great dignity for the living and the dead, and I won't tolerate it. We don't need to fake ghosts here, we've got the real thing. Robert Darby costume from the portrait. What happened then?
I just couldn't open the door. Nothing. It's quite chilly.
Yeah, temperature.
Quite chilly. I must say, Leslie, that, I mean, obviously I tour the country looking for ghosts. I visit places all the time.
You should feel this temperature.
And isn't it cold? But the thing is that I can honestly say that when I'm talking to people, I say, there is one place in the country that I can almost guarantee that something will happen to someone in the group that is most definitely supernatural or paranormal, and I have to say it's this place, it's this room, but nothing's ever happened to me.
Well, I know it hasn't, and it's very rare it happens to me, but I have seen people in remarkable states. Now, let's be serious, there will be people who are a bit hysterical, there will be people who are, what's for a better phrase, without to sound like their mother, showing off. And there are people who are, sadly, just struggling with whatever mental condition they're in. We all are at some point in our lives. But at the core of it, I have a lot of people in this room who spent a lifetime jeering and have had some very bad shocks in here.
Yeah.
Because, again, you're aware you're in a... It's like being on a different planet in here.
It is.
You go from that room into here, It's not very inspiring, but there's something absolutely remarkable. Do you know people will come from France to spend the night in this room? We've had that.
Yes.
And the reason is because when the cameras are rolling, or look, there's not one of us that hasn't lain someone in the earth,
No.
that hasn't prayed there is another life. And although some of us sound a bit desperate about it, I was not looking for it. I'm seeking to run a castle here to make history live, but
Yes.
I wasn't expecting the dead.
No.
And this room has a temperature is
Yeah, I'm again the one that
must
walks in
admit.
and says, people, can you feel the atmosphere? No, I can't. Can you feel the temperature has
Yes,
dropped?
it is.
But I have never sensed it like I've sensed it now. And actually my left leg is cold. And I hear this on programmes, I think, oh, load of rubbish. But it really is. And it's something that doesn't normally happen to me. And I don't think I've ever really experienced anything quite like that before. I don't know, I can't explain it. It's amazing, but it happens to so many people in here, doesn't
This is
it?
the phrase inexplicable.
Yeah.
I mean, scientific teams have come in and they've been, you know, we're in charge of our psyche here. And the one I really liked was I had some police officers from an unnamed squad who came in, who were the murder squad, and they were here to fundraise, and in the morning only 3 left.
Really?
Now, these boys don't frighten very easily. I remember finding a man of 6'7" who was a bin man from Essex crying because he was such a state. Look, I don't want people to be distressed here, but they are terribly taken very often. I do think some of it is mass hysteria, I'm honest. But I mean, but that's their personal experience. Others, I'm absolutely convinced. Do you know the temperature in here now is absolutely dropping through the floor.
I can feel it on the back of my neck,
I can.
around my ears, the top of my head. It is amazing.
What you get is this. You get a sick, sort of slightly sickly feeling. You feel like you're tipping forward. And you also get, or occasionally you get this sort of feeling that way. Girls quite often get a lower back pain, like an intensely bad period pain. And, you know, we don't know what's happened in this room.
No. Do you know who the ghost is?
No.
Or ghosts? There's
a-
more than one, surely.
well,
Now, there's
there
a
is.
child, isn't there?
There's a little girl. Now, I know some people say it's a boy. I think there's both. But there's a particular little girl called Ellie. Now, the reason I say Ellie, before it appeared on television, before anything like this room had something like 7 out of 10 people saying the same name. Ellie, Eleanor. Well, that's incredible. How on earth can that be? A boy occasionally. There's a woman in her early 30s that appears in here, but the one that really scares the hell out of us is the big fella. Occasionally, a very, very large black shape will appear in the room, but I mean 7 foot.
Yes.
And he's very threatening. We've known men pushed over, a sense of choking.
Yep.
We had 7 collapse in one night. We had a paramedic run out to come and help me with somebody one night, and then when it was being sorted, she left it with a colleague and said, could she come in, and she fainted.
Yeah.
So that was just all I needed.
Yeah.
We've had people who just stand here and talk, and it pours out of them. Now, they may have done a load of research first, but occasionally they say things they couldn't possibly know.
Exactly.
Now, the room is amazing, and it's very difficult. It goes off the scale on the magnometer. That's one one scientific fact. Another thing is we've had temperature drop. The biggest we had under scientific circumstances was 20 above to 2 below in 3 minutes.
There you go. Yeah.
Now, that's really going it, you know.
Yeah, it
and
is.
you could... The other thing, you can smell snow. I've no idea what that's about. They must say, smell snow. What are you talking about? You can smell snow. I'm not saying now, Richard,
No.
But other people, I've smelled
Yeah.
it. I haven't been threatened in here,
No.
but I have seen the lights flying, and I
Yes.
have seen people who have definitely seen something. But interestingly, at which point do people suddenly say, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that? There's lights going, the lights changing in the Great Hall now.
Right. Again.
Maybe
you see things-
it might just be candles, but I don't think it is.
No. Basically, this room is psychically very active.
Charged.
There's no getting away from it. And you know, if anybody really wants to come and have some form of ghostly or psychic experience, it's probably going to happen
And
here.
we can't guarantee ghosts.
Of course you can't.
And we're not saying we can't. We can. What we're saying is there are some extraordinary changes. We've had some hardened journalists here with a cynical eye. I remember one chap from BBC had to fly that left. He was too frightened to stay. Fear of the unknown is most of what people fear, but sometimes the room is very threatening. There's no doubt about that.
Shall we leave it
Yes,
to
please.
its memories
What's going on out here?
and its thoughts and see what's going on out here?
Just been candles taken up with change light. Maybe candles. I mean, you get electrical charges occasionally. Of
course,
But why
yeah.
do we get these? Do you know, one Sunday I had a chap here complaining that someone was playing tennis in the room.
Oh yes.
I don't know why people think ghosts are around, or spirits, or whatever energy forces you want to describe it to make one feel easier. I don't know why they think it's got to be a cold October day with the wind blowing at night. We get them in the middle of August, and we get extraordinary events. And the most frightening I had was this year when a chap who was in fact a forklift truck driver from Burton, and there's no reason at all why he shouldn't, but started to speak fluent Latin, which was pretty good.
Oh my goodness.
And then, yeah, that was very scary, and I thought, as this man learnt it. Then he started speaking to me in French, and I answered him in French, and he answered me. So he absolutely understood what I was saying. And he said, "Vous ne pas ma reine, you're not my queen. Vous êtes le grand vache de Rome, you're the great cow of Rome."
Wow.
Now, of course, a Huguenot speaking to me may see me that way. He then put his hand to hit me, and I got him in control, and he burst into tears. I got him on his knees, actually. I said, oh, I was his queen. There were 40 people in the room. It was just a Sunday afternoon. And they were badly shaken. Took me a long time. He'd never done anything like it in his life, 40 years of age. And it was an extraordinary experience. That's just his experience. There may be all sorts of psychiatrists who might come up with a reason why it happened. But in the end, no, there's a lot going on here. A lot going on here.
So here we are in the Great Hall, still dressed as Mary Stuart, and with us we've got various documents and books telling us of all the famous people and events that were here. Now, I think this place is so haunted because of the famous people that visited. And to be famous, I believe you have to have more energy, more of a presence, possibly a bigger aura. Now, when you meet a certain person and you say, my goodness, they left an impression on me, I think it's possible that those famous people can actually leave an impression on the building.
What a great thought. Isn't that a great thought?
So it's not their ghost that's here, it's their presence, it's the residual energy. And either the temperature's similar, it's the anniversary of when they were here, or something, or the atmosphere is the same.
You mean,
and certain people see it again, hear it again, sense them. And here they are. Now, we've actually got a list of famous people.
Yes.
And
events.
People in British history, that everyone just about visited this place. Margaret of Anjou was here. Henry III was here. Edward II
Most of them
was here.
Yeah, Henry VIII.
Henry VIII.
1511. He was
Yeah.
here. And they weren't just passing through either, Richard, were they?
Oh, no, they stayed.
Yes, there was big, long events. I mean, John of Gaunt was here most summers, it seems.
Yeah.
And because the castle rivalled Windsor... Oh, there was that... Did you know? I don't know if I told you this. Fantastic. There was a musician and troubadour court here from about 1360 until the end of the 1600s.
Wow.
And people came from all over the Midlands and danced and laughed together. And they were so badly behaved, I understand, that there was a court of law set up within the grounds just to control them. Because they were all out of control.
Good Lord.
It must have been a fantastic place. So the list goes on, and the events that happened here.
Charles I, Charles II, James I, Prince Rupert,
Hey, there's me.
Mary Queen of Scots, battles, sieges, terror, torment, happiness, all these emotions that have gone on within this incredible old building.
And who are these people that still haunted? I mean, we just said maybe there's some residue left of famous people. A lot of people feel Charles I is in the room, and certainly, interestingly, I am seen usually in white by serving officers, I've discovered, largely.
Really?
They're serving army. Yeah, I've had it 2 years ago.
Amazing.
A large group of men from the army saw me and were pulling my leg about me, teasing them in the night by coming to them in a white dress and frightening them on the ramparts. And they got quite nasty when I said, look, I wasn't here. And then they realised it was true. So very clearly, it's almost as if they go on duty.
Yeah, you see, this was a fort, this was a garrison.
Absolutely.
It was full of soldiers. It was besieged during the Civil War by Sir John Gell, Parliamentary Commandant of Derby. So it's a military base.
As well. We forget that. Yes, perhaps that's what it is. But in saying that, although this idea, and I think it's a fantastic idea, this of people's residue being left within things, the child that's in the king's bedroom, we don't know who she is.
No.
We don't know why she's still there or why so many people are so profoundly affected by her. Who is this horrible figure in a long dark coat with oily long dark hair, filthy looking creature who will appear next to me regularly, and he's certainly been seen, and I can tell because audience will go, and I think, what? When I'm speaking to them, you know, a group of people listening to me giving a monologue, and they see this man, and not everybody does, but pockets of them do, and I haven't even mentioned him, and he will appear dotting around the room, not looking at me. He seems to be searching for something. I have never seen him, but I can tell you at the side of me I felt the temperature rocket down, really cold.
Now, obviously this was a place of kings and queens, lords and ladies, but now, of course, it's not.
No, it's for everybody.
It's for everyone, and that's the beauty of it, because you have taken this place and in my opinion, made it something special for people through reenactment, through everything that you do. So how can people come? How can they visit the place?
Well, the important thing to remember is that I believe, like you believe, that history is not a private club. It's not ivory towers for academics. It's for absolutely everybody.
Hands-on.
Of course, academics do work here and produce fantastic work. But we want people to come here and share the castle. It used to be only open in the season, and in a general sense, in the winter it can't be open in the sense of the gate, because if it's bad weather. But we do have folks who come in party bookings most days throughout the winter, and they come away as far away as France to sleep.
I can imagine, yeah, because you do sleepovers,
oh, yes,
lock-ins,
right.
ghost tours,
right.
ghost walks,
right.
banquets, weddings.
The lot.
Everything
we
here.
had a christening here. We had a christening here 5 weeks ago for the first time since 1647. Twin boys and their brother were christened within the ruined chapel, and it was as if the castle shivered and the walls grew up again, because to have that back again was like bits of jigsaw puzzle going back. The lives who come here also bring something to this castle.
Amazing.
Now they do.
Yeah, that is the whole place is just, well, alive, but in a way through dead people.
Yes, and why not?
Oh, exactly.
You and I, and we shall move into history too.
Oh, of course we will.
Of course we will.
Yes, indeed. Leslie Smith, Mary Stewart, thank both of you for allowing us into this incredible place. And, well, in my opinion, this is probably one of the most haunted castles in Great Britain.
I wonder. Thank you very much for coming, Richard. It's been lovely.
Thank you.
See you again another time. Thank you. Thank you.